So in last week's Friday episode, we talked about faith and vision, seeing the vision, grabbing hold of it, and embodying that as faith, the psychology of faith. And today I want to continue on, and I want to talk about the process of how to achieve those visions, how to create those goals, but also I want to talk about the fear of the process. Most people do not quit because they lack talent. Most people quit because the distance between who they are and what they want to achieve feels very overwhelming. But every great achievement begins the exact same way, and that is with vision. And one of my favorite Bible verses that I talked about last week, and I also talk about in chapter 7, Art Takes Vision, in my book, You Are Art, is very much Habakkuk 2:2. Write the vision and make it plain, so he who reads it may run with it. See the vision, grab hold of the vision, and run with it. Do not tarry. And the profound wisdom hidden in that Bible verse, in that short, simple statement, is before you can run towards a vision, you have to write it down and make it plain. You have to know what it is. And that is the first step. The first step is clarity. Write the vision down and make it plain. If I was to ask you right now, what do you want out of life? Money's off the table. Money's not the answer. What is your dream? Could you actually give me a clearly defined dream in details? Not as a vague idea, but as a detailed blueprint for your future. If you are building a house, you would not just have a blueprint of like, oh, here's a house. I'm gonna draw a little kid's house and that's it. No, you are going to clearly define that house. You are going to block out every single room you want, and then you're going to show where you want your cupboards, where you want your washing machine, where you want the windows. You are going to get detailed as fuck with that blueprint, so that way it can be clearly made. Detailed blueprints become detailed maps that you can follow step by step to then achieve. So that is the first step, because studies also consistently show that writing improves focus, memory, and goal achievement because it forces the mind to organize itself around the target. The vision then becomes real, and when it leaves the imagination and it begins to enter form. Take it from the 4D, bring it down to the 3D. And the first step to getting it into the physical reality from the invisible is to put it on physical paper. To actually write it down word for word, what you want in detail for your future, for that dream, and for that vision. So you need to ask yourself, what do I want? And do not put a price tag on that. Do not limit that. I know in your current reality or in the past, you might have had limits. You might have chosen to settle, let's say, for the store brand rather than the name brand item. But that is not what we are going to do here. We are going to write down what we want shamelessly. Okay, and anytime we feel like, oh, I can't write that down, that's silly, that's this, we need to recognize, where is this shame coming from? Why do we have shame blocks in our solar plexus, in our gut? Why do we have shame blocks still woven into our nervous system? And we might need to sit with that and realize, why am I resisting feeling happy that I want this item? And why do I feel like I can't have it? Why do I feel like I'm not deserving? Okay, that's part of also the mindfulness, working on practice with ourselves. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we want? What do I want to become? And what kind of life do I want to create? Step 2 is break the vision into steps and ask yourself why. The stronger the why, the more momentum you'll have towards that dream. Let's say, for example, you do want money. Okay, that is a dream that you have. You're like, I would love to make $600,000 a year. That would be amazing. Okay, why? Why do you want to make $600,000? Do you need $600,000, or do you want that money because you realize my why is because, you know what? I want to take care of my family, and I want to take care of my relatives, and I want to take care of my parents and my kids, and I want to make sure my kids can go to college. I want to have extra side money that I can invest in nonprofits and start helping the homeless and helping the poor. Now you have a much stronger drive. You need to define your objective, not the product. The product is the money. Yes, you want that, and yes, you can have it, but what is your objective? Why do you want those things? You want a nice big house. Why? It might be because, I didn't grow up in a house. I just grew up, kind of on the streets, or I grew up in an apartment, or my house is really shitty. I want something that's nice and I feel peaceful in. Well, let's get even stronger with it. Why do you want that? Well, because I want to have a place of safety for my own children. I want it to be a place that we can gather and have community, that people are always invited, that it can have that warm, welcoming, open door, warm cookies on the counter kind of aspect to it. Okay, get more defined with it. Keep asking yourself why you want those things, because it's also going to then show to you if it's actually something that's really important to you and it's actually aligned with your soul, or if it's aligned to somebody else's dream for you. Because sometimes we might say, let's say I want to go to college. Why? Well, because my parents told me to, or that's what a successful person is. Well, why? Why is a person successful if they go to college? Well, because they're more respected. Okay, why do you want to be respected? Well, because currently, and you start realizing where you might have things that you want that are slightly maybe out of alignment with your soul. Again, no shame in what you want, but we need to define the why, and we also need to break it into steps, because once the vision is written, most people do start to become overwhelmed. Let's say you want $600,000 and you're currently making $80,000 a year. That's kind of a big gap, right? That's a little bit of a double. That's triple, quadruple what we're currently making. That's a big gap. So we're like, how the hell am I supposed to get that? I haven't even tapped 6 figures, let alone times 6. That's it, and the brain starts panicking because it's unfamiliar to the nervous system. It's unfamiliar to the mindset. We've never done that before. But if we write it into steps, now we start staring at the next step rather than the entire mountain. I just think of the movie Matilda with Bruce. He has this giant piece of cake in front of him. Well, how do you eat the cake? Bite by bite. You don't just shove the whole thing in your mouth at once, but you do step by step. You got to eat the cake. And you got to cheer yourself on to get that job done. So we want to not focus on the entire journey, just as we were, let's say, going on a hike cross country, or we were going on a drive cross country. You're not just going to jump from Detroit to Las Vegas. That's not how it works. I mean, that'd be pretty cool if we could, just teleport, but we actually have to go step by step, mile by mile. That is why the Bible says his word is a light unto your path. Okay, the hermit in the tarot cards is very much looking at the next step of the journey, not the whole way. He's looking down at the next step. What needs to be done now? So we need to focus on the next action, and that's why we're going to put our goals on paper. We're going to define why we want them, and we're also going to put the next step. So let's say you want to become a YouTuber. Okay, that's a dream that you have. You want to do that because you want to share a hobby that's important to you, or maybe you want to have an extra source of income. You want to become monetized because YouTube AdSense is a form of passive income because the videos never go away, so they constantly keep making you money. And you're like, I would like that. I would like to build up that career to maybe also quit one of my part-time jobs. Cool. Let's define that now. What's the next step? If you want to be a YouTuber, what would the next step be? Okay, what is your YouTube about? Define your channel. And then what does a YouTuber do? They have YouTube videos. So maybe we need to watch on how to edit some videos. Maybe we need to research. Our next step will be to Google, okay, what is the best editing apps? How much do they cost? Is there free ones that I can currently use? Okay, cool. Let's start doing that. And then the next step will be filming a video. Then what's the next step? You're going to edit that video. The next step, you're going to upload. And then you're going to leave it alone and you're going to let the Lord move the ways that it needs to move, okay? Not for you to figure out the end result or to force the outcome. It's for you, though, to do whatever you can with what you've been given in your power to plant the seeds for the harvest, and then to trust that life is going to see you through with that harvest. So we're going to write down, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? What is the next logical step? So write down the next logical steps. And you might not have all of the steps. You might not have all 100 steps that it's going to take to achieve that dream written down at that moment. But I guarantee you can write down at least the next 3 steps of what you could do to move towards that goal. A house is built 1 brick at a time. A book is written 1 page at a time. And a transformed life is transformed by 1 decision at a time. Step by step, you complete the journey. Because the process is always smaller than the mind tends to make it appear, which is how fear is part of the process. One of the greatest misunderstandings I think we have about fear sometimes is believing that fear means we're on the wrong path. I know for me, at least I had that mindset very much growing up, is like, oh, I'm so afraid of this and then it's probably not meant for me. And I realized, no, I was just unfamiliar with it and it was something new to me. So therefore I was uncomfortable with it. But that doesn't make it bad. That doesn't make it wrong. Fear, as I've heard it said, is just false evidence appearing real. It's like a mirage, like when you're driving through the desert. I don't know if you've ever driven through, like, let's say the Nevada desert. You'll be driving on the road, let's say even through Death Valley, and about a mile out, it looks like there's water on the road. It's a mirage. You get closer and there sure as hell is no water on that road, and then you're proven right as you get closer. That's how fear is. Fear takes your goal and it completely inflates it to, there's a big puddle. We're not going to be able to get through that. I don't know how we're going to do it. We probably shouldn't do it. We should probably just go back to what we were doing. Let's just give up now. But it's just false evidence appearing real. And when you actually confront it, when you actually get to where that water would have been on that road, it disappears. When you actually put the problem down on paper and you actually put down the next steps, it resolves itself usually. Fear means that you're growing. And on the other side of your greatest fears is usually your greatest blessings. And that's because most fear isn't danger. It's simply uncertainty, and it's the mind confronting something of the unknown. Fear is just of the unknown, and it's okay to not know. We won't always know the end result. We won't always know the how, and that's not our job. Our job is to not figure out the entire how, or to figure out how that seed is going to grow once it's planted in the garden. But it's our job to plant the garden. It's our job to sow that garden out in faith, to walk in the things hoped for and yet unseen. So if you have a goal of, let's say, having 100,000 YouTube subscribers on your channel by a certain date, it's not for you to figure out if you're going to have that, because fear will be like, I don't know if we're going to be able to achieve that in the next 6 months. We probably shouldn't even start because we're going to look like a fool if we don't get that. It's going to try to talk you out because it's unknown. So it's your job to start the channel. It's your job to stay consistent with the channel. It's your job to believe in yourself and to do your best to become 1% better with every single video that you make. And yes, your first video will not look as great as your 100th video, and that's okay. That means that's actually a good thing. That means you've grown. That means you have progressed. That means you've become a bigger, better person. And one of my favorite things in the Gita is that it teaches that growth requires action even when certainty is unavailable. Arjuna stood on the battlefield overwhelmed, confused, fearful, and doubting himself. But Lord Krishna did not tell him to wait until he felt confident. Lord Krishna told him to act accordingly to his purpose, because the lesson in that story, if you've ever read the Gita, or if you're interested in reading the Gita, is that you do not become courageous and then take action. You take action and then the courage develops. The unknown is not your enemy. The unknown is the classroom where the becoming takes place. It is in the wilderness where you become. It is in the wilderness where you are defined, and therefore then you take action and that momentum builds, and then you enter into the promised land. And that is where you need to detach from the outcome, because one of the central teachings of the Gita is you are entitled to your actions, but not the fruit of your actions. In other words, you need to focus on your work. Again, you are entitled to your actions. You're entitled to planting the seeds of that garden, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. It is not up to you. You cannot force those seeds to grow. That is up to life. That is up to God. That is up to the universe, your higher consciousness, whatever terminology you personally relate with on your journey, that is up to life. You need to release your obsession with results. That is part of achieving the life that you want, is releasing the obsession. That is also known as surrender. Learning to surrender to the outcome of things. And I know sometimes surrender in our heads might be a belief of like, oh, I have to give up. No, that's not what surrender means. I know I personally definitely thought in the past, like when I'd hear people be like, oh, you just need to surrender it, release it to the Lord. I'm like, you want me to let go and just fucking trust this shit's gonna work out. That means I'm gonna give up on my dreams. But that's not what it is. Okay? It's releasing. It's releasing. Like if you're putting the seeds in the garden, you need to surrender them to the ground. You cannot hold them. You cannot dig them back up. Oh, I'm going to keep holding on to the seeds. I gotta hold on to the outcome to make sure that they grow. They're not going to grow if they're in your hand. You have to release them and surrender them into the ground and trust that life is going to let them bloom. But most anxiety in our lives does come from trying to control outcomes that haven't even happened yet. And the mind does. It tends to jump years ahead, months ahead, weeks ahead, wherever that goal is set for. What if I fail, it asks. What if nobody likes it? What if it doesn't work? What if we spend all this time and we fail? But is it failure? Failure is only when you give up. If you have a goal of making a YouTube channel and becoming a YouTuber, yes, you might very well have a goal of one day having 100,000 YouTube subscribers. That might be your goal. And you might be like, yeah, I want that within 6 months. And 6 months might come around and you might have 89 subscribers. It might have not even grown past 1,000 or even 100 subscribers, and that might be disappointing. I get it, but you're not responsible for the outcome. And if you have been diligent and you have been making the YouTube videos and you've been believing in yourself and doing your best, did you fail? No, you did not fail. You did everything you set out to do, and therefore you've succeeded on your goals. You said that you were going to become a YouTuber, that you were going to start a YouTube channel, and you did. Now, just because you reach the 6-month mark and you only have 89 subscribers or a couple thousand and not close to 100,000 doesn't mean you give up. You might need to look at it and say, okay, what could I be improving that might make it flow better? Is there something that I need to work on? How's my audience retention? How's this? How's that? Let's see if we can improve it. Like if you're baking bread and your bread keeps coming out flat, you probably did something wrong. We need to look at that and fix it. And so you might need to have an evaluation period. But also, you did not fail just because you didn't reach the goal that you thought you should have reached by a certain time. Again, you need to release the outcome. It's not up for you. You are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Because even though the mind tends to jump to worst case scenarios of what if it fails, life is usually asking what's the next step. So when you hit that 6-month period, what's the next step? Evaluation process. How can we make it better? And the process becomes lighter when you stop trying to carry tomorrow on your back. Do today's work. Tomorrow will figure out itself and will worry about itself, and tomorrow will arrive when it comes. Even Jesus talked about that in the parables in the Bible. Do not worry about what tomorrow brings, for tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Just focus on today, because the only moment you have is now. And when you're worrying about tomorrow, you're creating that and bringing that energy into the present moment, and then you're going to create that life experience where you're stressed and worried tomorrow. And that is why you need to master your mind. Because worrying about a situation does no good for you, and the only thing that does is then continually manifest into then having a worrisome situation in that moment. Now, yes, you might be, I don't know if that's going to go well, that conversation at work. But that doesn't mean you need to go in with anxiety. You need to master your mind. As Paul says, you need to take every thought captive to Christ, okay, to that divine mind inside of you, to that higher mind of peace. And you need to go in with a state of peace. You need to go in thinking best case scenarios, because then even if it ends up being less than what you want it to be, maybe it is a slightly more less than ideal circumstance, you carry yourself with a lot more different energy than you would if you're going in already worrying and spiraling. Because the greatest battles in life are rarely external. They always are usually internal. The mind will generate stories, it will create doubt, it will invent problems that do not exist, especially about your goals and especially about things that you have yet to see manifest into your reality. And when left unchecked, those thoughts about fear and worrying and anxiety will begin controlling your actions. And that is why scripture repeatedly says over and over and over about guarding the mind. And that is why Proverbs talks, as a man thinketh in his heart, in his mind, in his subconscious, so is he. And that is why Paul says, take every thought captive. That is why the Gita talks about renewing the mind. That is why the Tao talks about renewing the mind. Because to the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. Across the board, the principle is the same. You either master your mind or your mind masters you, because whatever consistently occupies your mind eventually shapes your identity. And that is why another reason you are going to write your goals down on paper. Because when it's written down on paper, you can see it, and therefore you can think about it. And I actually have a video about that of It Works, which is a 100-year-old manifestation book. But across the board, if you study under different great teachers of the ancient times of past, even in the past just 20th century, they all have the same common principle. Write it down on paper, make it plain, and actually think about it. Meditate on what is good, on what is lovely, on what is pure. Your goals are good, lovely, and pure. You want them, right? Well, therefore, think about them. Don't be thinking about what you don't want. Think about what you do want. When fear comes into your mind, when Hasatan tries to accuse and tries to instill doubt into you and tries to sow worry, you need to take those thoughts captive. Now, how do you do that, you might ask? Great question. You tell it no. Seriously, I know that probably sounds a little silly and stupid, and you're like, that doesn't actually work. It does, though. Trust me. As somebody who used to have a mind that was very negatively and unchecked, because I just let it grow with a bunch of weeds, I had to prune all those weeds. And over time, it has gotten a lot easier, and it's very quickly, no, I don't really have negative thoughts. Yes, they still come into my mind because I'm human. I don't always get to control what comes into my mind, but I do get to control my response to the thoughts that come into my mind. And so when a negative thought comes into my mind, even let's say I'm editing my video and I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is going to do good. That thought just comes up. I don't identify with it. And I say, no, it's going to do amazing. And I quickly rewrite what I want the result to be. And so you have to tell the negative thoughts no. Take them captive, tell them no. And then tell your mind, direct your chariot with what you want. Write and speak what you want. By your thoughts, by your words, you create your life. The life and death is in the power of the tongue. Those that love it eat its fruit. You are either condemned by your words or you are blessed by your words. So bless your life with your words, and do not let your mind condemn you with negative words. So see the vision, write the vision, make it plain, and do not tarry with it. Run with it with 100% confidence that it is 100% possible for you.